This is Austin Liti Limits, where authors talk to authors about books and the craft of storytelling. Sponsored by Blue Ink Review, because typing the end is just the beginning. Find out more at blueinkreview.com. Emily Jon Tobias is an author and a poet. Her work has been nominated for the prestigious Pushcart Prize, and she has been featured in a number of literary journals. Her debut story collection, MONARCH, is the winner of the 2024 American Book Fest International Book Awards in the short story collection category. And she talked with our Scott Semigran.
So welcome to the show, Emily Jon Tobias.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. This is great.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to talking to you. So I read your collection here. I have, of course, on my iPad, so we can see that.
Yeah.
MONARCH, which is a collection of stories. And many of the stories are pretty difficult to read subject-wise. And you write about a lot of hard luck characters who are dealing with addiction or codependent relationships, struggling with life in general. Did this collection start off as like, okay, I'm writing a bunch of stories, it's going to be a collection, or were they just kind of disparate stories over time that you thought, well, these would all work well together?
Great question. This collection did not start out as a collection by any stretch of the imagination. The collection started when I was doing my MFA. And I was implored to explore craft in any way that I could. And so that's what I did. So I was reading everything and writing anything that kind of came through me. I happened to be in very early years of my own journey of recovery. So I was in early sobriety, and these stories would just kind of tear through me. And I had no intention of putting them together in collection. But as time went on through my education and through the MFA program, one of my advisors got involved and said, we have a book here. We have a book here. And so once I knew that, it was just full steam ahead to create the best first draft of the entire collection that I could make by the time the program was over. So I was working between 4 and 12 hours every single day for an extended, stretch of time to let this thing come through me. But I say that the collection wrote itself through me. I had no intention of publishing stories, writing a book, none of that was on the agenda.
Right. It sounds like you got caught up in the joy of the craft of writing, because when you're first kind of like cracking open your chest and revealing some of these things, right? Well, I imagine some of these stories are somewhat autobiographical because you've been very open about your recovery. And when you're first doing it, right, you just like, okay, I'm releasing this stuff. But then when you get to the joy of actually creating something, it's infectious, right?
Yeah. So I love what you said. For me, there was joy and every other emotion happening through me. This was a big struggle though to create. There was passion in craft. Like you're right about that. I found that I fell in love with the crafting, how we know to use craft to rein in their creative energy. I became totally immersed in that and very, very passionate. But it was not a joyful experience, the creation of it. I was quite raw and emotional and not nearly as adept as I am now at, handling my own emotional stuff. So it was a huge challenge. And there were moments of joy, and there were moments of sheer terror, and a lot of frustration, because I didn't have a lot of control over what the characters were trying to teach me. And I didn't have great coping skills to develop that relationship that was necessary with the characters and still care for myself.
Right.
And also, and there was no other way around it. The thing was going to be written. I never thought, I never, had a choice in like what was going to come through. That it didn't even occur to me to choose that. So people tend to say, there's some risky subject matter, and it's true, but there was never a choice in me. It just tore through. And so it was all the emotions. And, looking back on it, I truly feel that this project helped me heal, changed me, helped me grow, and certainly helped me stay sober in early years. And I had no idea that that was happening. This is only recently in hindsight that I feel confident in saying that.
It's very interesting. So there's so many great stories, but let's focus on the one that kind of stood out to me was the one titled Monarch, right? It's the titular story.
Mm-hmm.
And it has the main character, Georgia, who's struggling with a variety of things. She's in a codependent relationship. She struggles with eating. She's very overweight. We learn that she lost a child. That's not a spoiler. It's just part of the development of this particular character. And the way that it happened is so heartbreaking. So it kind of makes it easy to empathize with her eating disorder. But then this miracle happens, later in the story, where she meets a man while she's walking to the bar, and he's very kind to her, and there's kind of like this beautiful little moment that she has, and it feels very hopeful. So can you talk about that story in particular, how it came about, and that particular turn there where there's some hope
Yes,
for
and
her?
I'm so happy you asked about the story. It's one of the most tender stories in my heart. And I love Georgia with all of my heart. I spent so much time with her. That story had to be structurally redone because initially I had because essentially she allows her baby to die, right? So I had that situated at the end of the story as sort of the climax. And when we started to really look at this, we realized that no, that is not, this is par for the course for Jordan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we completely restructured the story and brought the death of the child to the forefront, to the beginning, to allow the reader to understand the depth of her suffering and what she was willing to let go of in order to hold that, because the whole idea is that she's gaining, but she has this massive letting go. So the real climax or conflict of the story is love. And so when Gabriel comes into her life, this is more of an internal conflict for Georgia, the receiving of love, the gaining of love, than the letting go of her child. And it's quite, there's a lot of metaphor that goes with that, the playing of metaphor, and it's quite whimsical and fairy tale like, actually, if you kind of look at it and deconstruct. But yeah, that story was structurally untangled and then put back together in a way. And I had help with that, and I was quite against it actually at first. I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And then as I began to get to know her better,
Right.
I realized, yeah, that this is no trouble for her. And in truth, the entire story is about motherhood, right? The central conflict, that line that runs throughout, is about her struggle, her sense of shame with her own mother.
Hmm.
which actually is what ties the whole collection together.
Right.
Mhm.
It's interesting what can happen with a story, especially in your mind, where you're thinking that in a linear fashion, right? That the revelation of what happened to her child is a powerful climax, and it's hard to kind of take. But then when you kind of think about what you want the reader to take away at the end, and then you kind of jumble it around like that, because the reader, an adept one can piece the linear part together themselves.
Yeah, I think
Right.
it's critical to consider where our readers stand. That's correct.
Right. Yeah.
But for me, the work comes right through the character. So always, like without fail. And that's a part of my process as a writer. And that will always be the case. So often, and that's why I think writing for me is such an incredible sacred challenge, right? Because it's not linear. When
Right.
when I'm getting to know these characters, nothing is linear. It exists
Yeah.
on all sorts of times and dimensions, and mostly in image. And so to take that and use craft to create the narrative, to deal with time, and to realize where the reader will be standing is an enormous challenge, and of course such a passion
Right.
and a
Yeah.
safety net also.
Right. When
Yeah.
when I was writing my novel, The Cadre and the Sparrow, I had written long backstories for both of the main
Yeah.
characters that I had originally planned to have in the book for both of them. And when I got to the end of the first draft, I thought, this is really kind of cliche, like just dropping into these backstories and kind of giving it out this way. And so I threw that all out. It took like 12,000 words out of my manuscript. And basically what I did was I had kind of like wrote these two little sections for these characters that were basically trying to represent these broken memories they had of their past. And I thought, well, this is more interesting because the reader's now piecing together what these two characters have, which are these bits of their memory that's all they have, these little kind of chunks of things that had happened. And I really enjoyed kind of doing that, just kind of like throwing away this huge section
Yeah.
of this book. But I felt it was more powerful that way because then the memory the memory that the characters have is then being filtered to the reader. It's like, well, you have as much as they have, which is not much.
Yeah.
Right. Or maybe like you have these desperate pieces and that's all you get. Right. And so you're living with what these characters have.
I love that.
But I agree with you. I think that revealing that piece of her story where you did was more powerful than putting it at the end, which would have been like a gut punch, and then you leave the character, you leave the reader with that. I liked where you placed it, and then you had some hopefulness there at the end,
Yeah.
right?
Thank
That your
you.
life could be like this, where it's like it seems like she was left for nothing, but you're getting hope. Like she couldn't understand why Gabe was being nice to her.
Yeah. And isn't this the way we feel sometimes?
Right.
It's quite moving, and I've been there, Georgia.
Right.
I
So
feel like
let's
a
kind of take a
sister.
left turn here and talk about your book itself because it was kind of left for dead, right? Your
Yeah.
book was initially picked up by a different press, Nomadic. They had some problems. And then your book was then picked up by Black Lawrence. Can you talk about how you must have felt at that time? You probably felt pretty lost
Thank
to
you.
have done all the work to get picked up by Nomadic and then have them fold. Can you talk about that process? It's very enlightening, not only to me, but I imagine for a lot of writers.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I was actually very devastated, and that sounds so dramatic, but I was quite depressed and saddened by the whole thing. I I had I had a handful of offers for the book from very small presses, and I was looking for something unique for the work, but also for me. I was really looking for community in my publisher, and I found Nomadic, and immediately I knew that they were the one. They were doing incredible work out of the Bay Area. They were a family, and so I was very excited. I signed on the dotted line. I didn't even, I didn't even look at these types of things.
Who needs a lawyer? I'm just signing.
Oh yeah, but prior to that, I had achingly looked at all of the fine print. So I was all set to go, and then I met my editor through Nomadic, Michaela Mullen, and we started to get into the book. We went through, I think, the third round, and Nomadic's funding got denied for the year, and we got the call that they were done. I was just short of internal design for the book. And I was absolutely heartbroken. And how you described that feeling of being lost is exactly it. I really wanted to quit. I mean, I really thought, because I'm a yoga teacher too, and I've got other things. So I thought maybe I'm not meant for this. And it was so hard. And so, I went to celebrate the closure with Nomadic. They had a party to celebrate the press. And so I went there and I met some fantastic people. And, I say all this because some of my dearest friends are right from that experience. So Michaela Mullen is my lifelong editor now and one of my closest friends. I've met other wonderful people through the experience. And so what happened with Black Lawrence is I really kind of got lucky. Diane, the owner of Black Lawrence, who's an incredible force for small press publishing, she migrated all Nomadic titles to her press. So because I was mid-production, they picked me up as sort of a new title. And we went forward from there. Again, I'll say, like, the book is worked itself through me in creation and continues to work its way through my life in form. And I'm just kind of like following it along.
Right.
And doing what we're, doing, because had it been up to me at that point, and my mom got very sick too during this time, all these things, I would have been done. Right. I think we're kind of taught to distance ourselves from the works we create, but I will never work that way. I am deeply connected to my work. And I think that's why I was offered this wonderful opportunity to stand up for it, to keep going. So. Right.
So I talked to you a little bit before our interview, and I know you're into music. You have a past of going to see live shows. And I remember when I was reading your work that I was thinking about, it has a very musical quality to it, very lyrical quality. It's very poetic. I was also thinking, you're from California. God, this reminds me of Jane's Addiction and Concrete Blonde and, singers singing about some of the same thematic things. I could hear that music in your work. Can you talk about how music inspires you and poetry, and how you put that into fiction writing?
Yeah, so live music was I spent a lifetime seeing live music, right? Since I was 13, thousands of shows, all over the United States, actually. So I am living in California, but I have spent time in every state in this country, except Alaska. I haven't made it to Alaska. So, and music took me to all of those places. There's a certain vibrational quality to a life that's lived that way, and not many people have had it. And it also brings people together in such a way. And then coupled by that, I was always a poet since I was a very little girl. And poetry has been in my life and my heart for my entire life. So I think when writing, it wasn't a conscious choice to allow music to enter. It just was totally natural. And not only through, music has a really beautiful way of doing some of the same things image does, which is it ignites senses, right? When we hear a song, we feel a certain way. And so it turned out to be a nifty tool because I can get right in there you know, to ignite this sense of being for the character and hopefully for the reader, because like you said, you picked up on certain qualities and they're sort of all across the map in here. But yeah, so it ended up being sort of a tool that I would use in craft. But in the initial stages of, you know, when we're generating work and building relationships with characters, it was just obvious, you know. It was the first entryway into memory image, you know, one of those really core elemental qualities that get me in the door. So yeah, I think that's what I'll say about that.
Do you listen to music while you write, or do you need?
It depends. You know, I'm a very disciplined sort of, I love ritual. Like I love ritual. I love discipline. I am very controlled in a lot of ways. When I write, I'm not. So it really, writing is part of my life that demands of me to feel into each moment and figure out what I need in ways that nothing else does. It's very interesting. And so it depends. So sometimes I will. Most of the time I don't, because it takes me super concerted effort to work through the visual component of my work. And it's a very narrowed focus that kind of happens here, you know, and so then I can get totally lost. I mean, the focus through the mental area, you know, in yoga we call it, you know, a third eye area, is very intense. So what I have to balance that with, I learned this through writing Monarch because I was terrible at it, which is I have to balance that with a lot of movement, a lot of breath, a lot of sort of lightening up, because I can get really intense and grounded and sort of stuck here. So right. The way I write in terms of rituals can vary a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
I've learned over time that my ritual is I do the same thing every single time.
Interesting.
That's something that it took me a while to figure out, but around 2015, 2016, I mean, I'm 53 now. I started writing when I was 21. So in 1993, when I graduated, I was writing, and it was a mess for a very long time. But around 2015, I started listening to music. I realized if it was music that I knew really well, it wasn't new music, that I could put it on and then the world was just blocked out. Right? It didn't matter if it has words or not, but if I've listened to this album a million times, I could put it on and then nothing else matters. And so I just started this ritual where I'd go to the same place, same time of day, usually my lunch break, put music on. The world is blocked out. I can write 1,000 words in an hour or so.
How beautiful.
I
Oh,
would just do that over and over. And now I've done it so often that when the music comes on, my brain's like, we're writing now. And I just do it. And I can do it repeatedly over and over in that kind of way.
yes, that is
It's like I've trained my brain that now's writing time and I'm going to do it,
We do have those things. There's a lot of research that shows that happens. And I do have some of that, definitely with yoga and movement.
Right.
And then certain scents can play a part with music. And I just kind of recalled this as you were talking. And I love what you said. The music that I will listen to always depends on the work and in the character.
Right.
Right. So when I wrote Mouth Organ, I was listening to a ton of Bob Dylan, you know, and which helps me connect with Monk, with the character.
Right.
You know, so I think that's more how it plays a part for me than anything.
Right. All right. So now's the time in the show where we do the lightning round. It's not a concept we came up with. We stole it from inside the actor's studio, but they stole it from Bernard Pivot. He stole it from Marcel Proust, but this is our version of it. So Emily Jon Tobias, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yes, I am ready.
All right. What's your favorite word?
Beloved.
Okay. What's your least favorite word?
I don't even want to say it. Moist.
That's a repeated one. All right. What turned you on?
Music, movement, spirituality,
Okay.
and good books.
What turned you off?
Righteousness and conflict.
Right. What is your idea of happiness?
To feel whole and loved and complete.
Who is your favorite author?
Such a hard one. I'm going to say Dennis Johnson and also Stuart
Okay.
Dybek for sure.
What was the second one?
Stuart Dybek for sure.
Okay. All right.
I
Excellent.
had to throw that one in.
That's a good one. All right. So if you could be a character from any book, short story book, novel throughout history, who would that main character be?
Oh, that's such a tough question, Scott. I'm going to say Sal Paradise from Jack Kerouac's On the Road.
All right. That's a good one. All right. So what is a profession other than your own you'd want to attempt?
Professor. Writing professor.
Okay. So what is a profession you would least want to do?
Bartending.
Oh, okay. I was a bartender for a long time, but you're in recovery, so I could.
I don't think it worked well for me.
All right. So last question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you reach the check-in desk?
Okay, yes. I would like to be told that you are a good person. Many people felt loved by you. Good job this time around.
Excellent. All right, everyone, go out and get the book Monarch by Emily Jon Tobias. Thanks for being on our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been a presentation of Austin Liti Limits, made possible with help from our good friends at Blue Ink Review, where typing "the end" is just the beginning. Find out more at blueinkreview.com.